Part 4 of If You Lived in Colonial Times brings us to the topic of laws. And we're going to start off with, what did people do on Sundays? Sunday was a very important day to the colonial people. Sunday was the Lord's Day. You spent the entire day in prayer and in thought about God. People went to the meeting house in the morning for 2 hours, and then you went home and had lunch, and then you came back to the meeting house for 2 hours. The meeting house was just what the name implies. It was where everyone met. It's where people made laws. It's where the church was. It's where town functions were held. So what were some of the laws that people had to obey? Laws varied based on town, and some are very, very strict, and some are very, I don't know, more suited for that particular town. But some of the things that were out there were no bad language, and that men needed to work on the roads a couple times a month. There were many specific laws, like I was saying. For example, men had to shoot 3 crows or 12 blackbirds. That was because the crows or the blackbirds ate the corn. A baker couldn't bake bad bread. That's very specific. There were also laws about having dogs. If you were too poor to feed the dog, then you weren't allowed to have a dog. And if you did have a dog, you were only allowed to have one. And there were also special Sunday laws. Everyone had to go to the meeting house. There was no laughter or games on that Sunday. There was no work. You couldn't do things like even make your bed. Men couldn't even shave. Who made the laws in the towns? Well, all the laws were made by the men, but these men also had to belong to the church, and they had to own land. Women were never allowed to vote. And what happened to those people who broke the laws? As we said before with schools, laws were meant to embarrass. They were meant to point out what it was the person did. So a lot of people had to wear signs up around where they were being punished to explain what they did. They were cruel. They were meant to deter people by how severe they were. Things like hangings. People in the stocks, that's where you'd put your head and your arms, or maybe even your feet, and people would come by and they would see you there with a sign up that said what you did. A ducking stool, where you are placed on a chair and you are forced, it's almost like a seesaw back and forth, where if you're at one end, that end was placed underneath the water while you were tied to that chair. So those are some of the laws that went on in the colonies in the colonial times. Our next section will be about the colonial homes, section 5.